Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter Sbrgata, currently the CTO here at Pureport, and really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend with us. For those of you on the East Coast, I hope you're all staying indoors and dry. We're a bit waterlogged here in North Carolina, but nevertheless, we're powering through. We've got a really exciting webinar for you here today. We're going to really dive into the idea of the evolution of SD-WAN, specifically as it relates to multi-cloud networking. I wanted to give everyone a heads up here before we really dive into the content. We will be doing a live Q&A at the end of today's webinar. So as we go through our slides, please feel free to enter any questions you have into the questions panel, and we'll be sure to address them at the end of today's presentation. Should we get too many questions that we can accommodate in a short period of time, we will also be sure to follow up with a set of written responses to all questions. So with that, let's dive into things. Today, we're really going to break today's session into kind of three primary parts, or four primary parts actually. I'm going to start and just give you a bit of an overview for those of you who might be new to Pureport and what it is we're doing and you know, how we go about doing it. I'm then going to turn over the presentation to Scott Rainovich from Futuriom, and he's going to take us through what he's seeing from an industry perspective around multi-cloud networking and specifically around SD-WAN and its evolution. We're then going to talk with Adam Powers from Silver Peak. He's going to talk about what Silver Peak and Pureport have been working on jointly together and how we're bringing together the two solutions between SD-WAN and multi-cloud infrastructure or multi-cloud networking. And then last but not least, we're going to bring on Kevin Kruger from Pureport. And Kevin's actually going to take us through a live demo of today's announcement. So it should be a good time. I hope to have some fun with this and hope you all get a lot out of it. So to get started, I really wanted to talk a bit about who Pureport is. So many people on this call may or may not be familiar with Pureport, but Pureport has actually been around for the better part of a couple of years now. And we've focused on really trying to rethink this idea about how you bring networking and cloud together. We really wanted to drive home this idea that networking, and specifically cloud networking, can really take a cloud native approach. We wanted to remove a lot of the barriers that organizations face on a daily basis for trying to figure out how to connect public cloud infrastructure to their private infrastructure. We talk a lot about this idea at Pureport of the fact that we can bring and connect any connection, and we can do it over a single fabric. So we don't care how you're trying to connect to the cloud. Where we excel is really driving this idea that we can deliver to you as a service cloud connectivity. And we're able to do that using a purely as a service delivery model. So in our implementation, there's no need for having to own and operate your own infrastructure for getting to the cloud. You can simply consume Pureport as a platform and as a service and get all of the benefits of high speed, high throughput, low latency connectivity to public cloud providers and pay for it on a usage-based billing model. We've attempted in everything that we've done to put forth a API first architecture. We really wanted to remove a lot of the heavy lifting required with creating cloud connectivity and allow you to consume Pureport's platform strictly as a service. And we focus on providing those connectivity options to the cloud over a variety of different mediums. So whether you're trying to get to us over a private connection, whether you're connecting your Pureport fabric to over more traditional IPsec, or now today with the announcement of being able to do it using SD-WAN. So this is the latest connection that we've added, a connection type that we've added to our fabric. And it's this idea that we understand that there are a number of organizations out there today that have made a significant investment in SD-WAN infrastructure. And instead of trying to instead of organizations trying to have to figure out how do they attach their SD-WAN infrastructure to the cloud, what we want to do is provide a very easy access, very easy on-ramp into the cloud infrastructure. And do it in such a way that doesn't require organizations to take on the manual burden of having to deploy SD-WAN endpoints in every single cloud that they ultimately want to connect to. And that is really what we call today SD-WAN Connect. And that's actually what we're delivering. So why did we decide to do SD-WAN Connect? Well, we really started thinking about, or how does SD-WAN Connect differ from what's out there today? If you think about a lot of the legacy network solutions that are out there, the way that you would attach SD-WAN infrastructure to the cloud is ultimately you as the organization have to take on the operational burden of connecting cloud infrastructure and your SD-WAN infrastructure together. That includes having to deploy the equipment, take on the configuration management, take on the operational responsibility of doing so. And every time you want to add a new cloud to your infrastructure, it creates more configuration churn, which introduces more possibilities for instability in your infrastructure. With the Pureport solution, we've tried to kind of rethink that paradigm and provide an easier solution to doing so. Now, you could have also accomplished this by simply doing an overlay, but overlays bring a high cost associated with them. As we know, most public cloud providers are more than happy to accept all of your data into their public cloud, but the moment you want that data to leave the public cloud, they're more than happy to bill you for it. The other issue that a lot of overlay infrastructure brings to you is the fact that you're basically at the mercy of the public internet in terms of its security, its privacy, and its performance. By leveraging Pureport and Pureport's private infrastructure, we're actually able to deliver a connectivity model that allows you to take advantage of the high-speed on-ramps provided by the public cloud providers today. The way we go about doing that is we've built an edge compute platform that allows us to run SD-WAN appliances. You're going to see that a little bit later when we get to the demo. In doing so, you can take advantage of private cloud-native connectivity into your favorite cloud infrastructure and attach it directly to your SD-WAN, your deployed SD-WAN, and get full routing capabilities from your branch offices all the way into the cloud simply by spinning up the connection. The other element to it is the fact that we also provide a robust API implementation. So for that organizations that ultimately want to automate and or orchestrate connectivity, leveraging Pureport's multi-cloud fabric, you can perform that as well, and it allows you to take advantage of cloud connectivity in a just-in-time consumption model and be able to ultimately consume cloud connectivity on your own terms and not be forced into situations where you've had to negotiate long-term multi-year contracts for the purposes of connecting to clouds. But before we get any deeper into the actual Pureport solution, I think it's important that we really think about the journey that SD-WAN is on and where it's going. And to do that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Scott. Scott?
Great, thanks a lot, Peter. Good stuff. I've been following this market for quite a while, both the cloud networking and the SD-WAN market, and it's really exciting to see kind of two sets of solutions come together, and I think that's evident by your partnership here with Silver Peak and just the hint of what's going to come together in the future. So let's get started. For those who don't know me, I'm Scott Rainovich. I'm the principal analyst at Futuriom. We are an independent research firm focused on cloud technology, and we specifically focus on gathering data from end users about trends, features, and needs they have in the cloud. So if we could go to the next slide. I'm going to set the stage here first by telling all of you what you probably already know, which is that we live in very interesting times with the pandemic. And one of the things that has done is kind of accelerated some of the cloud trends that were already in place. If you take a look at some of this data, you'll see that we do have information that shows that cloud infrastructure and spending is growing, and In fact, Forbes says it's growing at 4.5 times the rate of IT spending since 2009. And then a recent Flexera cloud survey shows that more than half of organizations are using multiple public clouds and private clouds, and then different combinations of private cloud. And then Goldman Sachs just came out with a survey in July that showed that the number of workloads in the public clouds went from 19% to 23% in just a couple of months, and they expect that to reach 43% in 3 years. And of course, RightScale is saying that we're seeing increased hybrid cloud adoption, and we've also seen data that shows that more folks are keeping sensitive data in the cloud. And then Cisco believes that data centers will process 94% of workloads, going forward. So that's just kind of like a set of data points that I follow that shows you how this trend is in place and how we have to figure out if more of this data and our application activity is going to a variety of clouds, meaning multiple public clouds or some combination of private and public known as hybrid cloud. We're going to have to support that, and we need networks that can support that. Often the networks are forgotten, but the networks actually provide the bandwidth and the plumbing for all these applications, so we need to pay attention. So the next slide, please. So we've been following these trends, as I said, and we tap data from end user surveys as well as interviews on a weekly and monthly basis. And we recently, this year, we've completed surveys in SD-WAN as well as multi-cloud. And I feel like it's natural that these two areas are going to kind of merge, if you will. And the reason for that is that we have, as I mentioned, that unprecedented cloud demand driving the need to connect, secure, and manage disparate clouds and networks. So enterprise and large Fortune 500 companies trying to connect all these clouds together, they need to think about how do they do that securely? How do they maintain, the customer experience and the quality level, and without, kind of blowing up the checkbook? We have networks and security converging. We have a trend called Secure Access Services Edge, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But basically, we have a lot of different applications that are combining the networking functionality with the security functionality, because all the traffic is on the network. So if you have ability to analyze and view network traffic, that can improve your security capabilities. So we're going to see that trend gain momentum. We're seeing SD-WAN has emerged, of course, on the edge of the network as a way to more easily connect enterprises to a WAN with a software-driven architecture. And now it's kind of moving toward the cloud, and I'll show you in a little bit what I mean by that. The SD-WAN market is growing very fast, and the reason is, as I said, it's basically a software-defined architecture which people have embraced, and we believe that multi-cloud networking is the next step of that software-defined control of the network. So we'll go to the next slide here. So here are a couple of the buzzwords that we're talking about, and other than just throwing around buzzwords, I'll try to explain real quickly what they mean. So, SD-WAN basically emerged as a way to use cloud-driven, software-based technology to connect to WANs more quickly and then have that software-based control. It didn't depend on specific hardware configuration. And all of our survey work shows that kind of the driving need behind SD-WAN is really network managers see as a better way to manage their WANs. They can get centralized visibility, policy control, as well as in many cases security, which is that trend I said, the merging with SaaS. So what is SASE? SASE was a term popularized by our Magic Quadrant analyst colleagues, and it's basically the integration of security functionality with network, introducing firewall as a service, cloud access service broker functionality, identity-based security, and using kind of cloud-based security techniques and integrating that with network management. So next we have the edge cloud that's emerging. So you guys have heard about this thing called 5G. Okay, so 5G is being implemented, and there's lots of new applications, whether it's business analytics, VR, AR, autonomous driving, or connected vehicles. They're all going to be connected increasingly at the edge of the cloud. There's going to be more data, and so we need ways to manage and scale that, and then connect the data back to the cloud, which brings us to multi-cloud. If you think about applications these days, they're increasingly diverse and distributed, and the data can reside in multiple places. You know, with containerization and microservices, really think of it as a virtualized application that's spread across different compute nodes in many different places. So hybrid and multi-cloud applications, as they grow, will require better multi-cloud networking connectivity. And they will require a way to dynamically control this connectivity with software. And as Peter spoke to, it increasingly has to be driven by APIs, the front end in a cloud native architecture. So that's kind of a overview of everything that's going on in cloud networking. And I'll move to the next slide. And what I'm going to do is explain what I meant by going into the cloud. This is kind of the MEF, which has been on the forefront of kind of defining what SD-WAN means from a technical perspective, because it's important to know in SD-WAN, there really is no, there are no standards. It's mostly a proprietary architecture by various vendors. So the MEF is trying to set out what that means and standardize some of the concepts. As I said, SD-WAN kind of emerged at the edge. So think of like the edge of the network on the left side, the enterprise network manager, or even somebody dealing with a remote office or remote site was just trying to figure out a better way, instead of like plugging in proprietary boxes and configuring them, how to deploy it on a bigger scale. And that came up with SD-WAN, which was a standard CPE that you could ship to somebody and then configure it from the cloud and then connect it to a cloud service that would know everything about it. And then you could manage various networking applications from the cloud, such as policy, application control. And then this came with other added benefits, such as improved application performance, the ability to switch between different connectivity, whether, you could have a backup 5G to your broadband in case it failed, and you could have automatic failover. So SD-WAN really came with this bundle of features, but that was all on the left side. That was kind of the enterprise edge, if you will. And then we started getting more deep into the heart of the network, where the SD-WAN providers were building out POPs that are becoming increasingly sophisticated with new security controls, new security applications, such as a proxy or a gateway that could kind of route traffic more efficiently. And then what we're doing is we're moving to the right. As we move toward the right side of this, we're moving into multiple clouds. And this is kind of where there was a gap in the SD-WAN story. It was great. It was great to hear that SD-WAN brought all this innovation to the market for the enterprise edge, but it wasn't solving the problem once we got inside of these clouds of how do you build out your kind of virtual enterprise network and then have all of this feature set go deep into the clouds, in terms of the security and the policy and the visibility and the application performance. So that's where we're going next with multi-cloud. So let's hop to the next slide. So what do people want from all this? Well, they're going to want an integrated logical view of networks. They're going to want a centralized point of security, visibility, and control across their network, as well as multiple cloud networks. And they want software-defined orchestration, basically of any network application or any security application. And they want network as a service for anything. They want to be able to get on a screen and provision a network in real time using software without having to worry about, where the boxes and the hardware is. So let's go to the next slide. And I'll say, preface this by, I'm an analyst, so I say stuff, right? So I try not to just say stuff randomly. We actually gather this information from the end users. And so this information, I'm going to show you a few slides of data came from our multi-cloud networking survey, which we conducted in the August-September timeframe with a multi-cloud report that happily Pureport sponsored and was part of. But the goal was really to gain insight into the end user's view of where the stuff is going and what the feature sets are that they need. So one of the questions we asked is, what are the most important cloud networking initiatives? And the most common response was 36% said they want to build overlay networks across cloud networking infrastructure. But what's interesting is the next response is they want to build cloud native networking technology that is integrated with cloud provider constructs and connectivity models. Now you might say, based on what Peter said, this is a little bit of a conflict. I think it comes down to how you define overlay. But if you take both of those groups, what they're saying is they want software defined control of one logical network. So whether or not you're using multiple clouds, why should you have to log on to a different interface or a different console for every network? You should be able to have one network you can log on to and control. And I believe that's what this data is showing. They want to integrate their virtual networking capabilities. So we go to the next slide. Okay, this is hopping back to SD-WAN. This is from our SD-WAN survey, and when we talked about, when I talked about some of the trends, this is where it comes from. The end users said they want better security. They want to support cloud or edge services with SD-WAN. So when we talk about multiple cloud, that's in this second response rate of 26%. They want to be able to extend SD-WAN into multiple clouds, and they want ease of use and management, that kind of WYSIWYG dynamic service provisioning aspect that comes with software-defined networks. Let's go to the next slide. So how does everybody want to do this? Well, like I said, it's all about integration. 63% want to integrate the existing infrastructure they have with the cloud networking infrastructure. They have their stuff in AWS, they have it in Google, they have it in Azure. As Peter said, sometimes they try to hold the data hostage, right, by charging you to take it out. But if you could build one logical integrated network, that's what people want to do. They want to have a single network that connects all these things. And then, cloud native is kind of the second biggest thing, but some people want to do it themselves, but there's different ways to do it. What they don't want to do, as you can see on the bottom, is rely on incumbent networking vendors to extend kind of legacy technologies. They want to move to the new realm. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is back to our multi-cloud networking report. Top use cases. They were ranked from 1 to 5, so the lower the numbers, the higher average ranking. So top was app performance in different clouds, and then you go down the line, workload mobility, common orchestration operating model, total low cost of consumption, and redundancy between clouds. Speeding up here just in the interest of time, but we'll go to the next slide. And this is like a great story that I think is going to start picking up steam in multi-cloud now. Like when we first launched our SD-WAN research, 4 or 5 years ago, there were people skeptical about the numbers, but we saw from our surveys that there was real demand for this stuff from the enterprise, and that's kind of played out as we've projected. It's now a multi-billion-dollar market, and I expect the same for multi-cloud networking solutions as well. So the next slide. So, to wrap up here, what do we see coming next? We see using software-defined techniques to manage multiple clouds. We see the SASE trend continuing. We see MCN, multi-cloud networking, extending SD-WAN capabilities. It's all about the software, less about the box, and it's about network as a service for anything. Next slide. Just to conclude and hand it back over to Peter and the team, this is my model here of what it means. It's really a virtual NAS, a virtual network of a service. Giving the control to the end user to leverage these cloud resources and build their network with software as they need it, and connect to anything, whether it's another private data center, co-location facility, or multiple public clouds. So that's what we're seeing, and I'd love to hear from the rest of the panel here on whether they're seeing the same thing. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. That was great. One of the things that I took out of that, or actually I took a couple of interesting things out of that. One is just putting some credence and some pictures in people's mind around what we mean when we say multi-cloud networking. It's kind of turning into the next generation of SDN, right? It kind of fits so many different models. And I think that being able to put some context around it and be able to describe it is extremely, extremely helpful. I'd say the other thing that I really took away from this was, this idea that organizations are looking for the ability to take back command and control. I think so many organizations, just through greenfield and brownfield builds and organic growth, have lost control of their infrastructure, and there are pieces of it running all over the place. And really trying to, say we've got to bring this back, and we got to bring this back to together and be able to gain control of our infrastructure and be able to layer on security and be able to layer on, centralized network services, and that's really what's going to be key for organizations to really take advantage of the idea of multi-cloud and a lot of the cost benefits and optimizations that come with running a multi-cloud infrastructure.
Absolutely.
So, as we kind of move forward, we've talked a little bit about Pureport, and really what our goal is to provide a service that gets you multi-cloud, really without having to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself. But the one thing about Pureport is that we are not experts in access technology. I'll be the first to tell you that. We can connect a lot of it, but our strengths really lie in providing you with, or providing our customers with, an easy to consume, high-speed private infrastructure for connecting to multiple clouds without the overhead and burden of having to run infrastructure yourself. So as we sat down and we thought about, how do we solve the problem? And as our customers came to us and said, how do we solve, taking our access infrastructures and our large investments in SD-WAN and marry it with what you're bringing to us from a multi-cloud perspective? How do we bring these worlds together? And from those discussions, we actually ended up having a tremendous amount of customers pointing us towards Silver Peak. And through that relationship, we talked to Silver Peak about what our thoughts were, and they were very receptive to what we were doing. And we spent a lot of time together, ultimately building out a solution. Because at the bottom line, at the end of the day, Pureport is not a, doesn't do SD-WAN natively. It's not what we do. That's all Silver Peak does, and they do a fantastic, fantastic job with it. So to take us through that a little bit, I'd like to introduce Adam Powers, who's going to walk us through, what Pureport and Silver Peak have been working on together. Adam?
Hey guys, thanks Peter. So yeah, my name is Adam Powers. I'm a senior product manager with Silver Peak. I am in kind of a unique position within Silver Peak. I'm a product manager. I deal with new features and rollouts of the product on a day-to-day basis, but I'm also the manager of a 120 site SD-WAN fabric that the company maintains. So all of our SEs, lots of our engineers, they connect to one another, to data center infrastructure, to our various cloud presences using the Silver Peak system. I manage that. So I'm the both the product manager and the user of the system. So I get to see what the users experience. And the thing that comes up again and again is simplicity and automation. If you've got one or two folks and they're in charge of 150, 200 or 300 locations, you can't be spending tons of time thinking about the various different types of cloud networking lingo, the methodologies, the way these things work. And so I had been brute forcing this in my own environment here. I would stand up a Silver Peak instance in Azure, and I'd learn how that works, and then go to Google, and then stand up another instance in AWS. And the idea here is that Silver Peak does manage the edge. So if you look at this diagram here, traditionally all of your branches will have one of these Silver Peak Edge Connect appliances. The appliances will connect via mesh or hub and spoke. It can leverage all different types of what we call an underlay, so like an MPLS connection, LTE, 5G, broadband. If it's IP and it's delivered to the Silver Peak appliance via Ethernet, we will form a tunnel, an IPsec tunnel across the various different underlays that you have available, and we'll stitch all these different branches locations together. These tunnels, there's a whole different discussion that we could have with you about how they work, the way they fell over from one to the other. Typically, let's say you have a pair of broadband connections and you're connecting to your data center. Maybe you have Comcast and AT&T broadband at a branch location. If somebody goes out there and unplugs one of those internet connections, there's no hit. It is completely transparent to the user. They don't even notice the fact that one of their two internet connections has gone down. So there's this magic in what we call the SD-WAN fabric. So in this diagram here, it's the gray area that you see. All of that is very high speed, it's very robust and fault tolerant. But the thing is, you need a Silver Peak Edge Connect appliance at each of the locations that you see on this topology to make the fabric, to interconnect the fabric, to extend the fabric to these different branches, to the data centers. What Pureport has done for us, and what has really made my job quite a bit easier, is that all I have to do is think about how Pureport connects to the fabric, connects to the SD-WAN fabric. So I think we're going to see and talk a little bit more about how that works, but we deploy a Silver Peak virtual instance into the Pureport environment. We peer up via BGP, and then the Pureport multi-cloud on-ramp location becomes just another Silver Peak location on the fabric. And so routing works normally. You don't really have to think much about, oh, that Pureport location on the back side of that Edge Connect appliance, so that SD-WAN appliance, there's Azure, Google, Oracle, AWS. That doesn't matter to the SD-WAN fabric administrator anymore. You don't have to go out and learn, don't have to think about how the Silver Peak performs or how it installs or how it's configured in these different clouds. You just press a button in Pureport and the Edge Connect virtual appliance shows up and it's ready to go. It appears in the Silver Peak orchestrator. So this kind of thing excites me as both a product manager and a user of the system. When you see this kind of automation, and we're quite proud ourselves. We, a long time ago, Silver Peak decided to add a wide variety of APIs, automation, bunch of stuff that allows this kind of integration to occur. We didn't have to go and rewrite the world to make the Pureport multi-cloud connectivity integration here work. These are leveraging capabilities that are just inherent to the way the Silver Peak system operates, that partners can connect, they can deploy our product and automate this. At the end of the day, the main thing that SD-WAN is about is automation, orchestration, and making things easy. So gone are the days of the CLI, gone are the days of I have 200 or 300 individual routers that I have to manage independently. From an SD-WAN perspective, everything is managed through an orchestrator, and everything is managed on a global basis. We resist the notion of snowflakes or individual configurations that exist on certain appliances but not others. All of that kind of goes away and is replaced by this global orchestrated, easily managed and easily configured SD-WAN fabric. So there's a lot to be said about how Silver Peak works, how it's deployed, priced, all this stuff. Tons of kind of deep conversations we could have about that. Contact us if you want to learn more about it. We were recently acquired by HPE Aruba, so you'll see a lot of that on our website. But from the perspective of the conversation here today, I think what we really want to bring forward is just how easy the Pureport solution makes connectivity to these different solutions occur. So I think that's the primary takeaway here. Is it's just much easier, which by the way leads to less mistakes, less gaps, things that you forget about, which result in security holes. So the easier things are, the less likely they are to break.
That's fantastic, and you made a comment that I absolutely love about getting deep into the tunnel discussion as a sidebar, and there's that that engineer in me that wants to dive right in. We'll have to do that sometime. I unfortunately don't get into technical discussions as much as I used to.
The bonding discussion,
yeah, exactly.
The fabric bonding discussion is kind of the propeller head nerdy part of it, but it's interesting, that's for sure, especially for old school networking types.
That's awesome. But you said something else though that I really keyed in on, and you talked about simplicity and automation. Certainly simplicity and automation as it relates to building an SD-WAN fabric and every all the work that you guys have put into, you folks have put into, and really kind of building that into the DNA of your infrastructure of how you build your product. And and I think that's where we create a lot of synergy between Silver Peak and Pureport, because we have a lot of the same philosophies. It's this idea that we want to make multi-cloud connectivity as simple as possible to generate a very seamless, friction-free user experience. When you think about what it takes to ultimately attach SD-WAN to public cloud, there is some complexities involved. There's routing that has to get taken care of, and getting a single link up isn't that challenging. But when you start thinking about, I need to add a second cloud or a third cloud, or I need to add redundancy, or even further, I need to go into geographical redundancy, and I have to get into traffic steering, and it starts to compound upon itself, and it's really complex under the hood of what needs to be done. And so we've tried very hard to bring and really bring a seamless experience to our customers, and one that really simplifies a lot of this. And to take us through that, I am going to turn the presentation over to Kevin Kruger, who's one of our senior solutions architects, and he's actually going to take us through what SD-WAN looks like and what's real and what we're actually able to deliver. So Kevin?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, if you don't mind, let's go to the next slide. And before we even get started, we'll take a look at what the workflow is going to look like in order to bring this appliance online. So we'll start off from the Pureport console, and it's a pretty simple, straightforward path that we're going to take here. We're going to end up adding a connection to our network, selecting our SD-WAN appliance type, in this case our Silver Peak appliance. We're going to prompt for some very basic SD-WAN account information. This is used during the automation in order to bring that appliance online and allow it to connect back to orchestrators. From there, it's going to provision the connection and actually provision the appliance, applying that automation in place. Now, from a typical user workflow, what we're going to see is that we'll then have to log into the Silver Peak orchestrator, accept that virtual appliance, configure a license and deployment type for that appliance, and last but not least, enable BGP and add a Pureport BGP peering. For the purpose of our demo, what we're going to do is we're going to jump from that provision connection and appliance. We'll bring that appliance online, take a quick look at what that looks like. And we're going to jump over to a network that's already configured and take a look at what this looks like with the Pureport fabric and the SD-WAN fabric joined together. With that, Peter, if you don't mind, I will take over our screen share and we'll jump right into it.
short delay when that's what happens when you let the CTO actually try and perform, stuff.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. You should be able to see my screen at this point in time. And what we're looking at is a Pureport console page. What you'll notice is that I have two networks already provisioned on here. We're going to take a look at the first network, which is our SD-WAN Connect demo network. Drilling into this network, we'll see that we already have an AWS connection on here, as this is an already existing network in place. So we already have our connectivity set up into our AWS environment. We're going to go ahead and walk through the process in order to add our SD-WAN appliance to this particular network. To do that, it's a really simple and straightforward path. We're simply going to hit our Add Connection button up here, and we're going to choose a Silver Peak appliance. We'll continue to use our Dallas, Texas location, and we'll just choose a speed for this. Next, we're going to have to enter in some very basic SD-WAN information. So let me just pull this over. All of this information will be used in our automation at the time of spin up of this appliance and allow us to bring this appliance online and let it call back home to the orchestrator. Next, we'll enter in some very basic BGP settings in regards to the customer ASN that'll be used later on in order to set up our BGP peering on this appliance. We'll enter in a private ASN number and simply hit next. We'll skip over our customer networks and NAT configuration, as this is typically used in an environment where we have overlapping CIDR ranges and need to address that overlapping IP conflicts. It's not the case in our environment, so we'll go ahead and skip over it. Next, we just need to give it a name and description. We'll simply use our defaults, and we'll hit our Add Connection. At this point in time, you'll notice that we've gone into a provisioning state. So what's happening in the background is we're provisioning that connection on the Pureport fabric, as well as in parallel spinning up the Silver Peak appliance. We'll apply the information that we gathered from the Silver Peak account information to our automation, bring this appliance online. We'll go ahead and give it a public IP address, and we'll also go ahead and map our MAC addresses and our interface IDs. This will allow for a real quick and simple setup at the time when we bring it online in the orchestrator. Now, this will typically take several minutes in order for this to go through. So in the time being, we'll go ahead and look at this environment and go ahead and see what it'll take in order for us to add another cloud environment to it. Again, following the same model, we're going to hit Add Connection. We'll choose Google Cloud Interconnect, and we're going to use our same environment, Dallas, Texas. In our case, we're going to look to connect back to our Salt Lake City or US West 3 region. And again, we'll choose a speed for this. Now, Google allows us to pre-create these interconnects in order to bring up the connection in place. I've gone ahead and already built this and have our pairing keys in place. So I'll go ahead and copy over these pairing keys. And again, I'll skip over our customer networks and NAT configuration since we don't have overlapping IPs in this case. Last but not least, we're going to hit our Add Connection. Again, we're going to follow a very similar model to what we just saw for the Silver Peak appliance. We're going to reach out over APIs to our Google Cloud connection, and we're going to go ahead and bring over those pairing keys and essentially build that connectivity back to our platform, allowing us to have our full Google connectivity. Now, depending on the cloud vendor of choice on what you're looking to connect to, this can vary a little bit. So for instance, AWS or Azure, you're typically going to have to go into your environment and connect these connections to some form of a virtual gateway in order to tie it back to your virtual network or your VPC. Now, explaining a little bit about what's going on while this connection is being created in the background, we're establishing a full mesh network. So what that means is we now have the ability for our Google environment, once this comes online, to connect to and reach back out to our AWS environment and AWS back to Google. This also allows us to have our connections between our Silver Peak appliance into each one of those cloud environments. What this means at a high level, though, is any connectivity that's needing to go between the cloud environments, this is truly deployed as a multi-cloud network, and those environments can actually speak together without having to have the Silver Peak appliance in the middle. That means your traffic is no longer hairpinning back to that Silver Peak appliance, containing or using any of the resources of that appliance. We'll give this just another moment for this to come online. Perfect. And from there, we're going to go ahead and hit done. Now, as our appliance continues to come online, we'll take a peek and we'll go into our other environment. The other environment that we have set up here is our SD Connect environment. As you'll notice, we already have an AWS deployment in here. We have a GCP deployment in place, and we also have our Silver Peak appliance that's already been fully configured. What we're looking at in this environment is that we have our full connectivity in place. We have the ability now to go in and actually drill into each one of these connections and take a look at our BGP routing information. As we can see, each one of our connections now has a BGP route table that's been populated and learned throughout the entire environment. Now, the key factor and the key thing to take away here is that we notice that our Silver Peak appliances have actually advertised in our different sites. So we've learned 3 different routes from our Silver Peak SD-WAN environment. The same can be true if you go in and look at our other cloud environments. We have our connectivity into our Silver Peak appliance and our SD-WAN fabric, as well as our connectivity into our other cloud environments, indicating full connectivity between these environments. Last but not least, checking our Silver Peak appliance, we see the same thing in place at this point. Additionally, we also have the ability to dig in and take a quicker or a deeper look at what these different route tables look like, showing that we have our full connectivity in place and full connectivity between our multi-cloud environment as well as our Silver Peak environment. With that being said, we'll take a peek over at our Silver Peak orchestrator. Now, what we're expecting to see here in just a moment is for our appliance to come online, and we should see a nice big green button in the top corner showing that our appliance has been discovered. It looks like that's our case here. Simply clicking on this appliance discovered, we have the ability to come in here and simply click our approve. And at that point in time, we'll essentially hand this over into Orchestrator, allowing for the standard Silver Peak process to onboard this appliance to take over and allow that full control to go in place, and even allow the customer the ability to go in and fully access this appliance and be able to finish their configuration on that point. With that, Peter, I'll hand it back over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate, walking through that with us. I think that one of the interesting things to really take away from what Kevin just showed us is the fact that everything he was doing was actually on our production system. One of the things that he showed was the ability to connect to multiple clouds, as well as to bring up the Silver Peak SD-WAN virtual appliance. And that was all being done live as you were watching him work. Kevin, am I correct in that?
Yeah, that is correct.
So if you take nothing away from today's presentation, you can at least take away from the fact that we've really focused on delivering a simple solution for allowing you to take your SD-WAN infrastructure and connecting it to a multi-cloud infrastructure and giving you kind of that single point of orchestration, that single point of control, and start to reclaim your network. And with that, as I promised, we would open up to attendees and answer any questions that folks may have about what they saw. So the first question I've got coming in says, it was mentioned that Pureport helps with cloud cost reductions. If we had a Silver Peak ECV deployed in public cloud, we would get the benefit of data reduction via Boost WAN optimization, achieving the same thing. The question, I guess, is how far can Boost be used in a Pureport deployment and architecture? So I'm going to touch on this, but then I'm going to ask Kevin and Adam to weigh in as well. But we certainly will be supporting Boost as part of the Silver Peak VM and can take advantage of that. Adam and Kevin, would you like to expand on?
Yeah, so this is, I think this is the important thing, is that fabric, the gray area of the chart that we were showing a little bit ago, that includes all of these flashy features like tunnel bonding and sub-second failover and WAN optimization, TCP optimization, data deduplication, compression. So because we are landing or deploying a Silver Peak Edge Connect appliance right into the Pureport, the edge right there, any traffic that goes across the fabric from a remote site to the Pureport Edge Connect is protected by all of those cool capabilities, WAN optimization, data reduction, tunnel bonding. you're bringing those sort of proprietary, really interesting SD-WAN capabilities right into the Pureport data center. I will say this, as it relates to deduplication and reduction, or what we call boost, you don't see as much of that for this kind of traffic typically, because a lot of it's port 443, a lot of it's encrypted. CIFS and other classical network stuff deduplicates quite well and really works well. But what the benefit you do get is in TCP optimization. So if you've got long haul branches that are 200 or 300 milliseconds away from the Pureport on-ramp location, the boost or the traditional WAN op subsystem will benefit that kind of connectivity.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Adam. Next question that we've got coming in is asking if the customer deploys a Silver Peak virtual appliance in a Pureport data center, making that data center the hub of the various cloud POPs. And the answer is the infamous in IT, it depends. The reality is it could, but it doesn't have to. A lot of what you're seeing is really all under the covers. We're all just dealing with IP routing. And while certainly it can become that, it doesn't have to become that. And it really kind of comes down to your architecture, what your design goals are, and how you ultimately want to evolve your network. And so the best way I can really answer that question is it really takes reaching out to either Pureport or Silver Peak, and we can sit down and we can walk through those in very specific use cases that are tailored to your exact environment.
Yeah, that's right. There is one quick example, very, very popular. In fact, I'm talking to you over this use case right now, and that's where you take a critical application like voice communications from your branches, and instead of sending them directly to the internet, like Teams, for instance, or old Skype for Business, you backhaul or first mile protect that traffic into the Pureport on-ramp and then go to the internet. And there's some subtleties to what that means, especially if you have two different internet connections at your branch. It means that traffic goes through the cloud hub at Pureport, the Silver Peak appliance. But if you lose one of your internet connections at the branch, nobody notices. So right now, if somebody backhoe, cuts through my AT&T or my Comcast connection here at my house, nobody on this call would notice it. So lots of interesting use cases, and you're right, it is very much about how you design the network, what your expectations are, and what you're looking for. Silver Peak is very flexible with regard to how routing works.
Excellent. I got time for a couple more here. We're getting some great questions, so appreciate that. The next question that I've got here is a question about if it's required that you have cloud services available in the same region location. And the answer is absolutely not. Kevin Kruger, would you like to expand upon that?
Yeah, Peter, thanks. So no, it's absolutely not required that you have this deployed in the same area that you have your on-ramp locations. So you can leverage another POP within the Pureport environment in order to have your on-ramps and the other locations for your cloud environments and deploy your Silver Peak appliance in a completely different POP and bridge that together.
Excellent. And the last question here, and there's a couple of different versions of this particular one. So I'll try and kind of cover a bunch of different points in it. But essentially what folks were asking is there any limitations to running the Silver Peak VM on the Pureport cloud? And kind of the paired question to this is, this feels an awful lot like a service that's been offered by some other Cloud Connect companies. Is it just kind of another Me Too or another service of the same? And my response to that would be that, first of all, no, there's absolutely no limitations. As you saw Kevin show in his demo, you still bring up your Silver Peak VM and you still administer it and manage it the way that you always have. One of the things that as we put together the solution and able to leverage the API integration between both Silver Peak and Pureport was the fact that we wanted organizations to not have to change the way that they work with Silver Peak in order to take advantage of all the reasons why they chose Silver Peak to begin with. So there is absolutely no limitations to how you use the Silver Peak virtual machine, and conversely, there are no limitations obviously on the Pureport side. I don't know if Adam or Kevin, if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
No, it looks exactly like any other Silver Peak appliance that's a member of your fabric. That's part of what I like it. It's even less. I mean, Azure, when you deploy an instance into those clouds, there are some caveats. You know, no access to broadcast at layer 2, those kind of things. So this feels much more like a just native Silver Peak appliance that you're managing like every other device in the fabric.
Great, thanks. So I think we're about out of time right now. There are a few other questions that have come in, and we'll work on bringing a response to those questions. But we really do appreciate your time and spending some time with us today. If you have additional questions, please, by all means, reach out to us, sales@pureport.com, and we will be sure to get right back to you. If you just want to try it, you can log in, create your account at console, https://console.pureport.com, set up your account, and you can actually start to build this today without ever having to speak with us. And with that, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you spending some time with us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much.